The night was cold, and the moon hung heavy like a silent witness above the forest. Silver light spilled over the valley of the Bloodfang pack, where laughter echoed, not of joy, but of cruelty. The courtyard was alive with mocking voices, their sounds sharp against the quiet sorrow of a girl on her knees. Her name was Alara, the lowest of the low, an omega with no family, no friends, and no one to shield her from the torment of her packmates. Her silver hair, a mark of difference, gleamed under the moonlight as if it had stolen light from the stars. Her torn dress clung to her trembling body, soaked with the scent of wolfsbane, the poison that burned through her skin like liquid fire. They had thrown it on her for fun. Maybe the wolfsbane will make her fur prettier next time, one of the warriors sneered, his voice dripping with mock amusement. Alara didn't reply. Her lips were pale, and her hands pressed against the ground, trying to steady her shaking. Every breath hurt, every heartbeat screamed. Yet she did not cry. Tears had long abandoned her. Because crying never helped. Because no one cared. She was the cursed Omega, born during an eclipse, abandoned at the pack borders as a child. To the others she was nothing, an omen of bad luck, a shadow to be kicked and laughed at. But if they only knew. If they only knew whose scent had begun to stir deep within her soul. Far away, in the mountains that bordered the valley, the Alpha King of all werewolves, Lucian Draven, stood on the balcony of his fortress. The wind whispered through his black hair, carrying a faint scent that made him still. A scent both delicate and wild, wrapped in pain. His wolf growled restlessly inside him. Mate. The word echoed in his mind like thunder. Lucian clenched his jaw. Impossible, he murmured, eyes glowing gold beneath the moonlight. His wolf, Aaron, snarled in defiance. She's out there, suffering. Go to her. He had searched for years for his mate, the one the moon goddess had destined for him. Yet he had begun to believe she did not exist. Until tonight. Back in the Bloodfang pack, Alara dragged herself to her small wooden shed at the edge of the territory, a place that smelled of damp wood and loneliness. She bit her lip to keep from crying out as she wiped away the wolfsbane with water from a cracked bowl. The wounds sizzled against her skin. Why does it always have to be me? She whispered to the empty air. No one answered, but the moon watched her. Her heart ached with a longing she didn't understand, a strange pull in her chest, like someone was calling her name from far away. She pressed a hand over her heart, eyes closing. And in that moment, miles away, Lucian felt the same pull. His heartbeat quickened, his breath deepened. The scent of silver lilies and rain filled his senses. He didn't know who she was, but he could feel her pain. He turned to his beta. Prepare the horses. We ride tonight. But, Your Majesty, his beta hesitated, the packs are at peace. Where are you going? Lucian's eyes burned gold. To find her. As the Alpha King rode through the forest, the wind howled, whispering of destiny. Meanwhile, Alara lay curled up in her bed of straw, whispering to the stars. If there's anyone listening, please, just once, let someone see me. Not as a curse. Not as a monster. Just as, me. The next morning, when the sun rose over Bloodfang territory, the ground trembled with the arrival of riders. The pack's guards ran to the gates, shouting warnings. Horses with black armor and silver crests stormed through the forest, and at their head was a man whose aura made the air heavy, his power radiated like the sun itself. The Alpha King had arrived. The Bloodfang Alpha rushed out to greet him, bowing low. Your Majesty. To what do we owe the honor? Lucian's gaze swept across the pack, but he barely heard the man's words. His wolf was restless, clawing inside him. She's close. And then, as the breeze shifted, he caught it, the scent of wolfsbane mixed with something painfully beautiful. His mate. Alara stepped out of the shed, unaware that the entire world was about to change. Her eyes widened as she saw the black-armored warriors. Her heart raced as her gaze met the Alpha King's golden eyes for the first time. In that instant, time stopped. Lucian froze, his breath catching. The world, the noise, the people, all of it vanished. There was only her, the fragile girl with haunted eyes, standing barefoot in the mud, her silver hair glowing in the morning light. He dismounted slowly, never breaking eye contact. The pack murmured in confusion, bowing deeply, unsure why the king's attention was fixed on a mere omega. Lucian's voice was low, rough, filled with disbelief and reverence all at once. You. His golden eyes softened. It's you. Alara's lips parted, her pulse hammering. What do you mean? He took one step closer, his gaze never leaving hers. You're mine. The entire courtyard went silent. The mocking faces, the laughter, the cruelty, all frozen in shock. For the girl they had poisoned for fun, was the destined mate of the most feared alpha in existence. And destiny had just walked into Bloodfang's gates to claim her. The courtyard stood frozen in the heavy silence that followed his words. The riders behind him bowed their heads in instinctive submission, sensing the raw power radiating from their king. The Alpha King, the terror of kingdoms, the untouchable force of dominance, had just spoken with a softness that none had ever heard before. You're mine. The sentence echoed through the air like thunder disguised as a whisper. Alara could barely breathe. Her chest rose and fell, her eyes wide as she stared at him, at the man whose golden gaze seemed to pierce into her soul and pull her toward him without permission. She wanted to look away, but couldn't. Something inside her recognized him before her mind could catch up, a warmth spreading from her chest to her fingertips, making her heart stumble in its rhythm. The pack members exchanged stunned glances, their whispers trembling with disbelief. That Omega? His mate? This must be a joke. He can't mean her. But Lucian didn't hear them, or rather, he didn't care. He walked forward with the quiet strength of a storm about to break. The wind moved around him, his cloak sweeping behind him like a shadow of power. Alara instinctively took a step back. Every nerve in her body screamed that she wasn't worthy, not of this attention, not of this man whose name was spoken with fear and reverence. Why, Your Majesty, she stammered, voice trembling. There must be some mistake. Lucian stopped only a few feet away. The sunlight caught his sharp jawline and the faint mark on his neck, the mark of a true Alpha King. His voice was deep, controlled, but there was an undercurrent of emotion that made the air feel alive. There are no mistakes when the moon chooses, he said. You are my mate. I can feel it in every heartbeat. Alara shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. But I'm just an Omega, no one. You don't understand. I can't be. He silenced her with a single step closer, his aura enveloping her completely. You are. His voice dropped lower, softer, but it carried more command than any roar. And no one will ever touch you again. The Alpha of Bloodfang, a man who had once mocked her suffering, quickly stepped forward, his voice shaking. Your Majesty, forgive the confusion, but she's weak, untrained, not fit to. Lucian's eyes flashed gold, and the words died in the man's throat. Do not speak of my mate as though she were dirt. The ground beneath them seemed to hum with his suppressed fury. Do you realize what you've done? You poisoned her with wolfsbane. You hurt the one chosen for me by the moon goddess herself. The pack members dropped to their knees, trembling. The Alpha stammered, We didn't know, Your Majesty. Lucian's growl silenced him. You didn't need to know. You should have treated her with kindness regardless. Alara's heart pounded. She had never seen anyone, stand for her before. The same men who had laughed while she screamed in pain were now bowing in terror. And this man, this stranger, stood like a wall between her and the world. But still, she couldn't understand why. Why her? Lucian turned to her his voice softening again, eyes searching her face as if memorizing every line. You've suffered enough, little one, he said quietly. No more. The gentle tone undid her. Tears spilled silently down her cheeks. She lowered her gaze, whispering, Why me, my lord? I don't deserve this. He reached out, his fingers brushing her chin, lifting her face so she had to look at him. His touch sent a strange warmth through her veins, chasing away the last traces of pain. You don't see what I see, he murmured. You think you're nothing, but the moon never makes mistakes. You were meant for me, and I for you. The bond pulsed between them, invisible yet unbreakable. The air shimmered faintly, a whisper of destiny wrapping around their souls. Alara felt it, a spark deep within, answering his. Then she fainted. Lucian caught her before she hit the ground, his strong arms cradling her as if she were made of glass. Her skin was warm against his chest, and for the first time in years, he felt something inside him shift. The cold emptiness that had always haunted him began to fade. He looked up, his voice cold once more. Prepare a carriage. She leaves with me. The Bloodfang Alpha dared to speak, his tone weak. My lord, please, she belongs to this pack. Lucien's eyes blazed. She belongs to me. There was no room for argument. The authority in his voice was absolute. As Lucien carried Alara through the pack gates, every wolf bowed, heads lowered to the dirt. The scent of fear lingered, but beneath it, something new began to grow, awe. For the Omega they had despised was leaving as the future queen. The journey to the Alpha King's fortress was long, and she drifted in and out of sleep in his arms. Each time she stirred, she caught glimpses of him, the way his jaw tightened when he looked at her injuries, the faint crease in his brow as though her pain hurt him too. When they finally reached the great mountain stronghold, the fortress loomed like something out of legend, tall spires of black stone, guarded by banners that bore the silver crest of the moon. Lucien carried her inside himself, refusing any help. Servants bowed deeply, their eyes wide. He placed her gently upon a bed in a grand chamber, silk sheets, soft light, warmth everywhere. She looked impossibly small in such a space. As the healers tended to her wounds, Lucien stood by the window, watching the moonrise. His fists were clenched, his mind a storm. How could they have done that to her? How did she survive it alone? When the healers left, he approached the bed and sat beside her. Her breathing was soft, steady now. A few strands of silver hair fell across her face, and without thinking, he brushed them away. You don't know it yet, he murmured, voice filled with emotion, but you've NGED everything. Her lips moved faintly in sleep, whispering a word he could barely hear. Mate. His heart stuttered. For the first time in centuries, the Alpha King smiled, a real, quiet smile. He leaned closer, his voice a promise against the soft silence. Rest now, Alara. When you wake, you'll never have to be afraid again. Outside, the moon bathed the fortress in silver light, sealing a destiny that would shake the werewolf world. The union of the feared Alpha King and the broken Omega who had captured his heart without even trying. The hunt for justice would begin. But so would love. The morning light spilled softly across the stone walls of the Alpha King's fortress, chasing away the remnants of the long, haunted night. The air was calm, the world hushed, as though the moon itself had ordered silence for the sake of the sleeping girl who now rested beneath its chosen roof. Alara stirred slowly. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. The scent of clean linen, the faint warmth of sunlight against her face, they were foreign sensations. She blinked, her gaze landing on the canopy above her. It wasn't the rotting wood of her shed, nor the cracked ceiling of an Omega's quarters. It was silk, shimmering, pale, and delicate. Panic flashed in her chest. She sat up suddenly, clutching the sheets. Her wounds twinged, but there was no pain. The burning from the wolfsbane had faded to nothing more than a dull memory. She touched her skin in disbelief. What happened? She whispered. The door opened with a quiet creak, and she froze. Lucien entered, dressed in black, his aura filling the room before his voice did. The golden light from the window touched his face, softening the sharpness of his features. For a man whose presence commanded armies, there was something unexpectedly gentle in the way he looked at her. You're awake, he said simply. Alara lowered her gaze. Your Majesty? He frowned. Lucien. She hesitated. I can't call you that. His lips curved faintly, not in mockery, but in quiet patience. You'll learn to. He moved closer, and her breath hitched. Every step he took seemed deliberate, as if he was trying not to frighten her, as if he knew how fragile she was beneath the surface. When he reached her bedside, he stopped and extended his hand. I had the healers tend to you. You were burning with fever last night. They said the wolfsbane nearly reached your bloodstream. Alara swallowed. I've lived through worse. His eyes darkened, and she instantly regretted saying it. The muscles in his jaw flexed. You shouldn't have had to. Silence stretched between them, not awkward, but heavy, like something meaningful waiting to be understood. He finally broke it, his voice softer. Do you feel strong enough to walk? S. He nodded timidly. Lucien gestured to the open balcony doors. Come, there's something I want you to see. He stepped aside, giving her space. Alara rose carefully, her bare feet touching the cool marble floor. The scent of roses and pine drifted in through the open air. She followed him out to the balcony, and what she saw made her heart stop. Below stretched an endless valley bathed in golden light. Rivers glimmered like ribbons of glass, Forests swayed in harmony with the wind, and far in the distance, white mountains kissed the sky. It was beautiful, wild and eternal. This, she breathed, this is your kingdom? Lucian nodded, watching her, not the landscape. Ours. Her eyes widened. Ours? He turned toward her fully, the golden in his irises glowing faintly. Everything that is mine, little one, will one day be yours. The words struck her like a wave. No one had ever offered her anything, not even kindness. And here stood the Alpha King, offering her the world as though it belonged to her already. Her throat tightened. I don't deserve this. Lucian took a slow breath, his gaze unwavering. You keep saying that, as if worth is something others decide for you. He stepped closer, until only a few inches separated them. You've survived things most wolves couldn't. You've endured cruelty without becoming cruel. That makes you stronger than half the alphas I've met. His voice had changed, softer, deeper, carrying warmth beneath its command. Alara turned her face away, blinking fast. I'm not strong. I'm just broken. Lucian's hand rose, hesitated, then gently brushed her cheek. Then let me be the one who puts the pieces back together. Her heart skipped. His touch burned, not with pain but with something else, something she had never felt before. It wasn't dominance or pity, it was care. Real, raw, patient care. He withdrew his hand slowly, as if afraid she might disappear if he moved too fast. You don't have to be afraid anymore, Alara. Not here. Not with me. She wanted to believe him, truly, deeply, but years of pain didn't fade in a day. Her eyes dropped to the floor. What will your people think? That their king has chosen an Omega, a cursed one? Lucian smiled faintly, his expression touched with something that almost looked like amusement. They will think what I tell them to think. And if they don't, they'll learn. His confidence wasn't arrogance, it was protection. He meant every word. Still, she couldn't help but ask quietly, why me? You could have anyone. He looked at her for a long moment before answering. Because when I felt your pain that night, it woke something inside me that had been dead for years. Because when I look at you, I don't see a curse, I see the light I thought I'd lost. The moon chose you for me, ND now that I've found you. His voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. I'll never let you go. Her breath caught. He turned away, as if to give her space to process, but she stopped him with a hesitant whisper. Lucian? He froze, her voice saying his name did something strange to him, like the pull of gravity shifting. She looked up at him shyly. Thank you, for saving me. He smiled then, slow and genuine, the kind of smile that reached his eyes. You saved me first. She frowned slightly, confused. What do you mean? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced toward the horizon where the sunlight touched the peaks of the mountains. When I found you, I thought I was rescuing you. But I realized later, I'd been the one lost all along. You're the reason my heart remembers what it means to feel. Alara's lips parted. The world around her blurred. The tears she'd held back for so long finally fell, quiet and uncontrolled. Lucian stepped closer again, brushing a tear from her cheek with his thumb. No more crying, he murmured. Only healing. She met his gaze, and for the first time, she didn't look away. There was no fear in her eyes now, only wonder. A gentle wind brushed past them, carrying the scent of pine and rain, the mark of the moon's blessing. The bond between them pulsed again, stronger this time, alive and undeniable. Lucian exhaled slowly, his wolf murmuring inside him. She's ours. And for once, Alara didn't resist the feeling that wrapped around her. She let herself believe, just a little, that maybe the fates had chosen her for something more than pain. That maybe love wasn't a dream meant for others. That maybe, standing there beside the most feared alpha in existence, she was finally home. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the world in gold and crimson, Lucian turned to her once more. Tomorrow, he said softly, you'll meet the court. I want them to see their queen. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Queen? His gaze softened, but his tone left no room for argument. You are my mate, Alara. That makes you my queen, by blood, by bond, by destiny. He took her hand in his, the touch gentle, reverent, but filled with power. You've spent your whole life bowing to others. It's time the world bowed to you. The wind carried his words into the horizon, where the moon began to rise again, silent witness to a love that had only just begun. And as the stars came alive above them, Alara whispered to herself, maybe I was never cursed, maybe I was just waiting to be found. Lucian heard her, though she didn't know it, and his answering whisper was barely audible, a vow sealed by the moon. You were never lost, my love. You were always meant for me. The fortress awoke to the sound of trumpets echoing through I.T.'s towering halls, signaling the dawn of a day that would be remembered for generations. The morning sun stretched its golden fingers over the marble floors and high glass windows, bathing everything in light. Servants moved quickly through the corridors, whispering in awe. The news had spread like wildfire, the Alpha King had found his mate. And she was an Omega. Alara stood before the mirror in her chamber, trembling slightly as she looked at the reflection staring back at her. She almost didn't recognize herself. Her long silver hair, once tangled and dull, now flowed in soft waves down her back. The scars that had marred her skin had faded, healed by the Alpha King's healers and his care. A pale blue gown, woven from moon thread silk, hugged her frame, glowing faintly under the morning light. She looked like someone else. Someone royal. Yet deep down, she still felt the same frightened girl from the Bloodfang pack, the one who had learned to stay quiet to survive. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. Come in, she said softly. The door opened, and Lucian stepped inside. His presence filled the room instantly. He was dressed in ceremonial armor, black and silver, the crest of the moon engraved upon his chest plate. His dark hair framed his face perfectly, his golden eyes glowing faintly even in daylight. For a moment, he didn't speak. He just looked at her, really looked, as though the entire world had stopped existing. Alara shifted nervously. Is it too much? I've never worn anything like this before. Lucian took a slow step closer, his expression unreadable. Then his voice, deep and low, broke the silence. You're perfect. Her cheeks warmed. You're only saying that because I see you, he interrupted gently. Not the Omega they made you believe you were. I see the woman the moon chose for me. Alara's heart fluttered painfully. You always say that so easily, like it's natural. He smiled faintly, the corner of his mouth curving upward. It is natural. For me. When he offered his arm, she hesitated. Lucian, she whispered, what if they hate me? What if they can't accept me as their queen? Lucian's golden gaze softened, but his tone carried that quiet command that could silence armies. Then they'll learn to. He leaned closer, his voice a soft growl. No one questions the moon's will. And no one questions mine. Her fingers trembled as she placed her hand on his arm. His warmth seeped through the fabric, steadying her heartbeat. Together, they stepped into the grand hall. The throne room of the Alpha Kingdom was nothing like anything Alara had ever seen, vast and glittering, with walls carved from black stone veined with silver light. The ceiling rose high above, painted with the history of the werewolf clans, wars, alliances, and the eternal bond between moon and wolf. At the far end stood two thrones, one carved from obsidian for the Alpha King, and another smaller one beside it, made of moonstone, untouched until this moment. As they entered, hundreds of eyes turned toward them. The room was filled with nobles, alphas from other packs, and court elders dressed in fine silks. Murmurs rippled through the air like the hiss of a serpent. She's an Omega? This can't be true. The king must be bewitched. Lucian ignored them. His steps were slow, deliberate, filled with power. He held Alara's hand firmly, guiding her to the dais. Each whisper that rose fell silent as they approached, his aura too commanding to defy. When they reached the thrones, Lucian turned to the court. His voice carried like thunder, echoing off the stone walls. You have heard the truth, he declared. The moon goddess has blessed me with a mate. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. And she stands beside me now. All eyes turned to Alara. She stood tall, though her heart pounded in her chest. The weight of hundreds of gazes pressed down on her, each one judging, questioning, doubting. Lucian's voice softened, but it carried deadly authority. From this day forward, Alara of the Bloodfang pack is your queen. She is your Luna, the heart of this kingdom. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some wolves lowered their heads in respect, others stiffened in disapproval. One elder, a proud alpha from a distant pack, dared to step forward. Your Majesty, he said carefully, we mean no disrespect, but the title of Luna cannot be given to one of Omega blood. The balance of the hierarchy. Lucien's eyes flashed gold. The balance, he said coldly, is what I decide it to be. The Alpha dropped to his knees instantly, bowing his head. Lucien's power radiated through the hall, pressing against every wolf present. His voice rumbled like the growl of an ancient beast. For too long, strength has been measured by birth and cruelty. But I tell you this, the true strength of a wolf lies in the heart, not the rank. My mate has endured more than any of you could imagine. She has survived hatred, poison, and pain, and still, she stands. He turned slightly, his gaze softening as it met Alara's. That is the kind of strength I want beside me. That is the strength of a queen. Silence filled the hall. Then, slowly, one by one, wolves began to bow, first the loyal guards, then the nobles, then even the hesitant elders. Heads lowered in submission, and the sound of hundreds of knees touching the stone echoed like a heartbeat through the chamber. Alara stood frozen, eyes wide, breath caught in her throat. She looked at Lucien, the man who had changed everything with just his presence, his faith, his belief in her, and something inside her shifted. She wasn't afraid anymore. Her voice, soft but clear, broke the silence. Please, rise. Her words, though gentle, carried a strange kind of authority, not forced, but earned. The crowd obeyed. Lucien smiled slightly, pride flickering in his golden eyes. When they finally sat on the thrones, him in the seat of power, her beside him, Alara felt a weight settle on her shoulders. But it wasn't the weight of fear this time. It was purpose. Later that evening, when the court had dispersed and the torches burned low, she stood by the balcony again, looking out at the glowing kingdom. The stars shone above, and the scent of rain drifted in on the wind. She heard his footsteps before she saw him. You did well today, Lucien said quietly, coming to stand behind her. She smiled faintly. I was terrified. I know, he murmured, resting a hand on the railing beside her. But you didn't let it show. That's what courage is, feeling fear, and still choosing to stand. Alara turned to him. You believed in me before I could believe in myself. He looked at her, the golden glow in his eyes soft and warm. That's what mates are for. Their gazes locked, and for a heartbeat, the world fell away. The tension that had lived between them since the first moment, that mix of destiny and distance, finally dissolved. Lucien reached out, his hand brushing the side of her face. Alara, he whispered, her name tasting like a prayer on his tongue. Her lips parted, her heart trembling. He leaned closer, his breath mingling with hers, the space between them fading until it was nothing. His voice was a low promise. You belong to no one's shadow anymore. Then his lips met hers. The kiss was slow, not of hunger, but of awakening. The touch of two souls that had wandered too long in loneliness, finally finding their way home. The bond between them flared, pulsing with light, a warmth that spread through both of them like fire under skin. When they broke apart, her forehead rested against his, and neither spoke. They didn't need to, because in that silence, surrounded by moonlight and the hum of fate, two hearts that had once been broken now beat in perfect rhythm, one promise, one love, one destiny. And high above, the moon shone brighter than it had in a century, blessing the union of the feared Alpha King and his once-forgotten Omega Queen. For the first time in her life, Alara smiled without pain. She wasn't the cursed Omega anymore. She was the queen, his queen. And her story of suffering had finally begun to turn into one of love. The fortress stood under the silver gaze of the full moon, a symbol of power, fate, and eternal vows. Its light poured through the high windows like liquid glass, shimmering over the marble floors of the Alpha King's stronghold. Yet tonight, that light felt heavier, older, sacred. For in the silence of that night, destiny stirred once again. Alara couldn't sleep. She stood on the balcony of their chamber, her fingers gripping the stone railing as the cold air brushed her skin. Below her, the kingdom slept peacefully, unaware of the storm that churned within her heart. It had been 2 weeks since her coronation. 2 weeks since she'd been crowned Luna Queen of the entire wolf realm. Yet even now, she often woke from dreams where she was still the broken Omega, kneeling in the mud, the laughter of her tormentors ringing in her ears. She thought the crown would silence those memories. Instead, it made them louder. You can't change the past, a voice murmured behind her. She turned to find Lucian leaning against the balcony doorway, half hidden in shadow, his golden eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. Even dressed simply, in a black shirt and loose trousers, he carried the effortless aura of command that made the air shift around him. "I didn't hear you come in," she said softly. "You were lost in your thoughts," he replied, walking toward her. "I didn't want to interrupt." She smiled faintly. "You never interrupt." Lucian stopped beside her, following her gaze out over the valley. "You're thinking about them again, aren't you? The Bloodfang wolves." Alara hesitated before nodding. "Sometimes, I still hear their voices. The way they used to call me cursed. The way they laughed when I begged them to stop." Her voice trailed off. "Even after everything, I can't seem to make those memories quiet." Lucian's jaw tightened. He hated the pain that still lingered in her eyes, hated that ghosts of her past dared to haunt her now that she was finally free. He turned toward her, his voice firm yet tender. "Those wolves no longer have power over you. You are not the Omega they broke. You are my Luna, the queen chosen by the moon herself. You've conquered more than any of them ever will." Alara lowered her gaze, her voice barely above a whisper. "But what if the others can't see that? Some of the alphas still doubt me. I can feel it when I walk through the halls." Lucian stepped closer, his hand lifting to tilt her chin upward until she met his eyes. "Then let them doubt. Their belief doesn't shape your destiny, you do." His words sank deep, settling like warmth in her chest. But before she could reply, a knock sounded on the door. "Enter," Lucian commanded. His beta, a broad-shouldered man named Kale, stepped inside and bowed. "Your Majesty, the High Priestess of the Moon Temple requests your presence at dawn. She says the moon has sent a sign." Lucian frowned slightly. "A sign?" Kale nodded. "She calls it the moon's trial. She says it concerns the coup." Alara stiffened. "Me?" Kale's gaze flickered toward her briefly before he bowed again. "Yes, my queen. She says it is tradition. Every Luna must face the moon's trial to prove her spirit is true." Lucian's voice darkened. "No one questions the spirit of my mate." The beta hesitated. "Forgive me, sire, but it is not a test of loyalty. It is a test of fate. The moon herself demands it." The king was silent for a long moment. Then he exhaled slowly. "Very well. We'll attend at dawn." When Kale left, Alara turned to Lucian, uncertainty flickering across her face. "What does it mean?" Lucian brushed a strand of hair from her face, his expression unreadable. "The moon's trial is ancient magic. It tests not your strength, but your heart. Every Luna must walk through her own shadow and prove her soul's purity. But I'll be with you, no matter what happens." She swallowed hard and nodded, though fear coiled inside her. The dawn broke cold and silver. Mist clung to the mountain peaks as Lucian and Alara rode together toward the Moon Temple, a colossal structure carved from white stone, perched high above the valley. The journey was silent, save for the rhythmic pounding of hooves and the whisper of wind through the trees. When they reached the temple gates, the high priestess awaited them, cloaked in silver and blue, her eyes pale as the moonlight itself. "Welcome, my king. Welcome, chosen Luna," she said, bowing deeply. Her voice carried the weight of centuries. "The moon has been watching. She calls her daughter to walk the path of truth." Alara dismounted slowly, her hands trembling despite the calm expression she tried to wear. Lucian was immediately beside her, steadying her with a touch. "She will not face anything alone," he said firmly. The priestess's gaze lingered on him for a moment before she smiled faintly. "No one can walk another's shadow, Your Majesty. Even an alpha cannot protect a Luna from what lies within her own soul." Lucian's hand tightened on Alara's. The priestess turned to Alara. "When the moonlight touches the altar, you will step forward. You will see not with your eyes, but with your heart. Do not run from what you see." Alara nodded, her breath shallow. As the first rays of morning struck the crystal altar, silver light filled the temple, wrapping her in its glow. Lucian started forward, but the priestess raised a hand. "She must go alone." Lucian's eyes burned gold. "If she's harmed, she won't be," the priestess said softly. "The moon tests, not destroys." Alara turned to Lucian, her voice trembling. "If I fall, you won't," he interrupted, cupping her face in his hands. "You're stronger than you know." His thumb brushed her cheek. "I'll be right here when you open your eyes." She nodded, drawing strength from his voice, Ram the warmth of his touch. Then she turned and stepped into the light. The world vanished. Alara found herself standing in an endless field beneath a pale sky. The air shimmered, and shadows began to move around her, familiar faces, cruel laughter, the ghosts of bloodfang wolves circling like vultures. "Cursed Omega," they hissed. "Unworthy Luna. He'll see what you really are." Their voices sliced into her like knives. She wanted to run, but her feet were rooted to the ground. Her chest ached, her vision blurred. Then she saw her, a reflection of herself standing a few feet away. Pale, trembling, eyes full of sorrow. The girl she used to be. Alara stepped closer, tears burning her eyes. "Why are you here?" The reflection whispered, "Because you haven't forgiven me." Alara froze. "You hate me for being weak," the shadow Alara continued. "You hate that I let them hurt us, that I stayed silent, that I believed their words. You think you became queen by leaving me behind, but I am still you." Alara fell to her knees, the truth crashing through her. All this time, she had carried her pain like a chain. She had risen, yes, but part of her still believed she wasn't enough. Tears spilled freely now as she reached for her reflection. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry I hated you. You did the best you could. You survived." The shadow smiled faintly, and as Alara touched her hand, light burst from the contact, warm, radiant, forgiving. The voices of her tormentors faded, melting into silence. The shadow dissolved, and the field filled with silver light. When Alara opened her eyes, she was back in the temple, tears on her cheeks, but they were tears of release, not pain. Lucian was kneeling beside her instantly, his hands cradling her face. "Alara? Look at me." She did, and when their eyes met, he saw it, the peace that hadn't been there before. "You passed," the high priestess said softly. "The moon accepts her queen." Lucian exhaled deeply, pressing his forehead to hers. "I knew you would." Alara smiled weakly. "I wasn't sure I would." He chuckled lowly, the sound deep and warm. "You've never failed at anything the moon set before you." The priestess raised her hands toward the rising sun. "Let it be known across the realms. The Luna of the Alpha King has faced her shadow and risen whole. The bond between them is blessed by the moon herself." Lucian stood, his hand entwined with Alara's. As they walked out of the temple, the wind lifted her hair, carrying the faint scent of lilies and rain, the scent of her soul finally at peace. And as the first light of morning kissed their joined hands, Alara whispered softly, "It's strange. I don't feel broken anymore." Lucian looked down at her, his eyes filled with something that went beyond love, something eternal. "You were never broken, Alara. You were just waiting to be seen." The wind howled softly in agreement, carrying their laughter into the valley below, where legends were born. The Queen of the Moon had passed her trial, and the Alpha King's heart had never been prouder. The days following Alara's moon trial were filled with calm, the kind of peace that often precedes a storm. The kingdom of Ardent Hollow glowed with early autumn light, gold and crimson leaves blanketing the castle grounds like scattered embers. Birds sang in the dawn mist, and the river that wound around the fortress whispered like a lullaby. But even in the beauty of those days, Alara sensed something shifting, a quiet unease that lingered in the shadows of the walls. She stood by the great window in the council chamber, watching the horizon where the sun was just beginning to rise. The warmth of Lucian's realm surrounded her, the stone halls no longer cold but alive with banners, flowers, and laughter. Servants smiled when she passed now, warriors bowed their heads respectfully. Yet something in her heart remained restless. Behind her, the sound of footsteps approached. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. Lucian's presence always arrived like a storm before he even spoke, silent, powerful, and unmistakably alive. His scent of pine and midnight wrapped around her as his voice came low and deep. "Couldn't sleep again?" Alara smiled faintly. "You can always tell." He came to stand beside her, his golden eyes reflecting the morning light. "I can feel it when you're uneasy," he said quietly. "Our bond is stronger since the trial. Every heartbeat of yours echoes through me now." Alara turned toward him, her hand brushing his arm gently. "Then you must feel how heavy my heart is." Lucian's gaze softened. "Tell me." She hesitated, then sighed. "It's strange. I've never felt stronger, and yet, something is coming. I can feel it. The peace feels too still, as if the wind itself is holding its breath." Lucian tilted his head slightly. You've always had a wolf's instinct for storms. But whatever's coming, we'll face it together. His certainty calmed her, as it always did. And yet, the whisper of danger would not fade. Later that day, as the sun climbed higher, the royal court gathered in the throne hall. It was a meeting of alphas, leaders from allied packs across the kingdom. Some came to pledge loyalty to their new Luna queen. Others came out of curiosity, and a few came cloaked in hidden resentment. Alara stood beside Lucian, dressed in deep silver silk that shimmered with each breath. The symbol of her station, a crescent moon circlet, rested upon her dark hair. Though her heart raced, her chin was high, her gaze unflinching. Lucian's hand brushed hers under the table, a silent reassurance. The council began with rituals and oaths. Alpha Kale of the North pledged his sword. Alpha Murin of the Rivers bowed his head. But when Alpha Garen of the Bloodfang remnants stepped forward, the hall went deathly silent. He was an older wolf, thick with muscle and scar, his eyes the same dark hue as those who once tormented her. Alara's pulse quickened, memories threatening to resurface. Alpha Garen, Lucian said coldly. You represent the last of a pack that once betrayed the crown. Speak carefully. Garen bowed stiffly. My king, my queen. His voice was gravel. I come not for forgiveness, but for unity. The Bloodfang are scattered and weak. We seek to serve under your rule. Alara studied him closely. There was something strange in his tone, too smooth, too deliberate. Serve, she said quietly? Or survive? The question hung in the air like frost. Several alphas shifted uncomfortably, but Lucian's expression remained unreadable. Garen smiled thinly. Both, perhaps. Wolves must adapt, your majesty. Even those who once misjudged the moon's chosen. A murmur rippled through the hall. The insult was subtle, but it was there. Lucian's eyes glowed faintly, his power rising like fire beneath his calm exterior. You will watch your tongue in my presence, he said softly, dangerously. Garen bowed again. Of course, my king. I only meant that time changes all things. Even fate. Alara's wolf stirred uneasily inside her. There was poison behind his words. But before she could speak, Lucian's hand brushed her wrist, a silent warning. Not here, not yet. The council ended in uneasy silence. That night, the castle slept, but Alara could not. She wandered the moonlit halls, her thoughts heavy. The faint echo of laughter from long ago still haunted the corners of her mind, but now, a new worry had taken root. She stopped at the window overlooking the courtyard. The air shimmered faintly, magic. A figure moved below, cloaked in black, slipping through the shadows toward the eastern tower. Her heart leapt. Without hesitation, she turned and ran down the hall, bare feet silent against the cold stone. She reached the tower entrance and pressed herself to the wall, listening. The scent was faint, but unmistakable, wolfsbane and blood. A trap. Before she could act, the cloaked figure turned, and met her eyes. Garen. He hissed softly, pulling a dagger glowing with cursed silver. The moon's queen, he sneered. Still playing at royalty. Alara's wolf surged forward, power crackling through her veins. You shouldn't have come here, she said, voice trembling with fury. He lunged. She dodged, the blade slicing through the air where she'd been standing a heartbeat before. Energy flared around her, the silver shimmer of her Luna power. Awakening. When his dagger came again, she caught his wrist, twisting sharply until he dropped the weapon with a cry. You think you can poison me again? She whispered, her voice shaking with rage and grief. You took everything from me once. Never again. She pushed him back, her eyes glowing silver bright. But before she could strike the final blow, strong arms caught her from behind. Lucian. He had arrived like lightning, his expression carved in fury. Step away from my queen, he said, his voice low, vibrating with deadly calm. Garen staggered backward, clutching his arm. You'd defend a cursed Omega against your own kind? Lucian's eyes flared gold. She is my kind. She is my mate, my Luna, my heart. And you just sealed your fate. The air exploded. Lucian moved faster than sight, one hand closing around Garen's throat, lifting him effortlessly off the ground. Power radiated from him in waves, shaking the walls. Alara watched, her chest rising and falling, the heat of battle fading into a rush of emotion. Lucian's wrath was magnificent and terrifying. the power of a god barely contained in mortal flesh. Tell your ancestors, Lucian growled, his voice like thunder, that the age of cruelty ends with you. He released Garen, letting him fall to the ground in a heap. Guards stormed in moments later, seizing the traitor and dragging him away. When the hall was quiet again, Lucian turned to Alara. His breathing was ragged, his expression softening as his gaze fell on her trembling form. You could have been killed, he whispered, stepping closer. So could you, she replied. But I wasn't afraid. Not this time. He reached for her, pulling her against him. For a long moment, they simply stood there, holding on to each other, the storm within them breaking at last. I felt you through the bond, he murmured. Your fear, your courage. You've changed, Alara. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. Maybe. Or maybe I just finally believe what you've always seen in me. Lucian tilted her chin up and kissed her, slow, fierce, filled with every promise they had ever made. The wind outside howled, the storm breaking over the mountains, but inside the castle, there was warmth, light, and love that burned brighter than any tempest. And though neither of them knew it yet, this night would mark the beginning of something far greater than vengeance or survival. For beyond the mountains, in the shadowed lands of the fallen packs, a darker force was awakening. One that had waited centuries for the blood of the Alpha King and his fated queen. But for now, the storm raged only in the distance, and dawn was still a few hours away. They stood together in the half-light, hands entwined, hearts steady. The storm. Before dawn had come, but they would face it as one. The storm had passed, leaving behind the faint scent of rain and the whisper of distant thunder rolling over the hills. Morning sunlight filtered through the castle's stained glass, scattering colors across the marble floors like fragments of forgotten dreams. Alara awoke in Lucian's arms. His warmth surrounded her, his steady heartbeat the only sound she cared to hear. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe that peace had finally found them. His breath stirred against her neck as he slept, his arm draped protectively across her waist. But even as she lay there, her wolf stirred uneasily. The bond that connected them pulsed faintly with something deeper, an echo of dread that came from far beyond their realm. She closed her eyes and saw flashes, dark forests, red moons, and eyes watching from the mist. A voice, low and ancient, whispered her name. Alara? Her eyes snapped open. The vision vanished, leaving behind a chill that crept into her bones. She turned to look at Lucian. Even in sleep, his expression was tense, as if his instincts sensed what hers did, that the storm they had faced was only the beginning. By mid-morning, the castle was alive with motion. Guards replaced the damaged gates from Garen's infiltration, courtiers whispered in corners, and messengers ran through the halls. The Bloodfang Alpha had been imprisoned in the lower dungeons, but the unease he left behind clung to every stone. Lucian sat in the council chamber, his broad shoulders taut with restrained power. His golden eyes, usually calm and commanding, now burned with restless focus as he listened to his beta's report. Your Majesty, Kale said, laying out a map on the long oak table, our scouts found something beyond the northern border. The remnants of the Bloodfang pack have gathered again, but they're not alone. They're being led by someone calling himself the Heir of Shadows. Lucian's gaze flicked up sharply. A title, not a name. Yes, my king. But the stories surrounding him, they say he was born of the moon's curse itself. He commands not wolves, but shadows. The Bloodfang follow him like disciples. The chamber fell silent. Alara, standing beside Lucian, felt her pulse quicken. Do we know what he wants? She asked softly. Kale hesitated. Our spies say he seeks revenge against the royal bloodline, against the Alpha King and his Luna. He believes the moon made a mistake in choosing you. Alara's breath caught. The words stung, though she had heard similar ones before. But this time, they carried the chill of prophecy. Lucian's hand found hers beneath the table, strong, steady, grounding. Let him come, he said quietly. He'll find no weakness here. Yet when the council ended, and the others departed, his calm began to fade. He stood by the window overlooking the courtyard, his expression unreadable. Alara approached him slowly. You're thinking of the prophecy, aren't you? He turned to her, eyes shadowed. There are old legends, ones my father spoke of before he died. The Heir of Shadows was said to rise when the moon chose her final queen, a queen born of both pain and purity. Her light would draw the darkness back into the world. Her heart ached at the fear beneath his voice. You think that's me? He looked at her, then sighed. I think the world has always feared what it cannot understand. You are light, Alara. And light always calls to shadow. She stepped closer, pressing her hand to his chest. Then let them come. If my light calls them, let it burn them too. A faint smile touched his lips. You speak like a queen. Your queen, she whispered, rising on her toes to kiss him softly. That evening, the first snow began to fall, soft, silent flakes drifting through the air like feathers from the wings of ghosts. The castle was bathed in silver light, the world outside hushed and still. But the quiet felt deceptive. Lucian had doubled the guard. Every watchtower burned bright with flame, every corridor patrolled. Yet Alara knew, when darkness chose to strike, walls and swords would mean little. As night deepened, she found herself drawn once again to the balcony overlooking the forest. The moon hung low and red, its glow painting the snow in blood and shadow. She could feel something out there, a heartbeat not her own, pulsing faintly through the bond between realms. Then she heard it again. Alara? The voice floated on the wind, soft as silk and cold as death. She froze. Who's there? No answer. Only the rustle of snow and the distant call of a wolf. Then, from the darkness of the trees, a figure stepped into the moonlight. Cloaked in black, his eyes glowed the color of frost, ancient, cruel, and hauntingly familiar. Alara's heart stopped. He smiled. It's been a long time, little Omega. Before she could speak, Lucian's presence filled the doorway behind her. His power surged instantly, golden light flooding the air. Step away from her, he commanded, his voice low and lethal. The stranger didn't move. Ah, the mighty Alpha King. The moon's favored beast. His smile widened. Tell me, Lucian, does it please you to share your crown with a creature born of my bloodline? Lucian's eyes narrowed. Your bloodline? The man tilted his head. I am what remains of the Bloodfang's true heir, the son of your father's greatest sin. The moon marked me once, just as she marked her. But where she was blessed, I was cursed. Alara's breath caught. You? He bowed mockingly. They call me Cairo, the heir of shadows. And I've come to recall. Aim what the moon stole from me, her power, her light, and you. Lucian moved in an instant, his body between them, the ground trembling beneath his fury. You'll touch neither her nor this kingdom. You have no claim here. Cairo only laughed, a sound like cracking ice. We'll see. The moon cannot favor two children forever. One must fall for the other to rise. And with that, his form dissolved into mist, vanishing into the night. When silence returned, Alara could barely breathe. She turned to Lucian, her voice trembling. He's real. He's been watching us. Lucian cupped her face, his touch gentle but his eyes fierce. He'll never reach you. I'll burn the world before I let him. She wanted to believe him. But deep inside, a strange ache lingered, not fear, but recognition. Something about Cairo's voice stirred a memory long buried, a shadow of the girl she once was. That night, as Lucian held her close in their bed, she couldn't sleep. The wind howled outside, carrying whispers from the past, whispers of wolves and moons and sins older than any kingdom. And in the depths of her mind, she saw once more the red moon, bleeding light into a darkened sky. The heir of shadows had returned. And fate, it seemed, had only just begun to play its cruel game. Far beyond the borders of the realm, in the ruins of the old Bloodfang citadel, Cairo stood before an ancient altar. The moonlight dripped down his pale face as he pressed a hand to the cold stone. The prophecy was never about the Alpha King, he murmured. It was always about her. My sister of the moon. The stone cracked beneath his touch, glowing faintly with the same light that once surrounded Alara during her trial. And as the wind howled through the ruins, Cairo smiled, a smile that promised war, destiny, and the unraveling of everything the Alpha King and his Luna had built. The shadows were no longer waiting. They were coming home. The nights that followed were heavy with silence, and silence in the wolf realm was never a good omen. The forests that once sang with life now stood still, as if holding their breath. Even the river that curved around the castle flowed slower, its water reflecting the color of wine under a sky that seemed perpetually dark. Lucian stood on the highest balcony of the fortress, his gaze fixed on the horizon. His golden eyes flickered like molten amber beneath the blood-tinged moon. Every instinct in him was awake, prowling, restless. He could feel it, the world was shifting again. Behind him, Alara entered quietly, her gown brushing softly against the floor. She had always moved with grace, but now, there was something ethereal about her. Since Cairo's appearance, her presence had changed, her aura glowing faintly with the same silver shimmer that had once shone during her moon trial. The moon had chosen her, and it was awakening something deep within. "You haven't slept in days," she said softly. Lucian didn't look away from the horizon. "Neither have you." Alara came to stand beside him. The wind played with her hair, lifting the dark strands around her face like threads of midnight. Her hand brushed his, and though her touch was gentle, the bond between them flared, a rush of warmth, of love, of shared dread. "The blood moon rises tomorrow," Lucian murmured. "The same night it rose when my father fought the last of the shadow wolves." Alara's heart ached at the weight in his voice. "You think it's connected?" He nodded once. "The blood moon always brings balance, or destruction. It doesn't rise without reason." He turned to her finally, his gaze softening. "If Cairo meant what he said, that he shares your bloodline, then the moon may have bound you both to the same destiny." She swallowed hard. "But how could that be? I was born in the lower villages. I had no family, no name. How could I share blood with the heir of the Bloodfangs?" Lucian reached for her, cupping her face. "The moon hides many truths. But whatever your past, it doesn't define your soul. You are mine, Alara, chosen by fate, not born of it." She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes for a moment. "And yet fate keeps calling us back to where it all began." At dawn, the kingdom awoke to crimson light. The sun rose behind a veil of mist, and for the first time in decades, the sky carried a red hue, the first sign of the blood moon's arrival. The castle stirred with uneasy energy. Soldiers sharpened their blades, witches whispered prayers, and the people gathered in the courtyards, fearful but faithful. For when the moon turned red, legends said the veil between light and shadow thinned, and old spirits could walk once more. In the temple courtyard, Alara stood surrounded by priestesses of the moon. Their silver robes shimmered, their chants soft but urgent. She wore white this time, the color of purity and sacrifice. "The blood moon is not your enemy," said the high priestess, her ancient eyes kind. "It tests the bond between shadow and light, between Alpha and Luna, between life and the wild magic of the moon." Alara's hands trembled slightly as she looked up at the reddening sky. "And if we fail that test? Then darkness will rule this age, and your mate's line will fall," the priestess whispered. "But if you prevail, your names will be sung for eternity." Alara's breath caught. She had faced cruelty, pain, and rejection, but never the burden of destiny itself. "Prepare yourself, my queen," the priestess said softly. "When the blood moon reaches its peak, the heir of shadows will come for you. And only love, true, unbreakable love, can banish his darkness." By twilight, the kingdom was silent again. Clouds swirled like smoke, and the red moon loomed large above the mountains. Lucian waited in the royal courtyard, dressed in black armor that gleamed like obsidian under the moonlight. His sword hung at his side, a blade forged in moonfire, blessed by the goddess herself. But it wasn't his weapon that gave him strength tonight. It was her. When Alara appeared at the gates, the breath left his lungs. She was radiant, her silver eyes glowing faintly, her gown flowing like mist around her. Power hummed around her like a heartbeat. Lucian took her hands. "When this begins, you stay behind me." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "I won't hide, Lucian. Not from what I was born to face." Before he could argue, the air shifted, cold and sharp, carrying the scent of iron and smoke. The wind howled, and from the darkness of the forest, shadows began to move. Hundreds of eyes glowed red in the night. Lucian drew his sword. "So it begins." A voice rang through the silence, smooth as velvet, deadly as poison. "Did you think the moon's curse could be outrun, brother of light?" Cairo emerged from the darkness, his cloak billowing behind him like liquid smoke. The moonlight revealed his face, eerily beautiful, pale as bone, his eyes reflecting the blood moon's glow. "You came for me," Alara said, stepping forward. "I came for what is mine," he replied softly. "The power that should have been mine from birth." You carry it, the moon's heart. Give it to me, and I will spare your king. Lucian stepped between them, his voice a low growl. You'll touch her only through my corpse. Cairo smiled faintly. As you wish. The battle began like thunder. Wolves of shadow poured into the courtyard, creatures made of mist and hatred. Lucian's warriors clashed with them, steel meeting darkness in a storm of sound and fury. The air trembled with magic as Alara lifted her hands, summoning silver light that burst across the battlefield like starlight against ink. But Cairo was relentless. He moved like smoke, his every strike a whisper of death. He and Lucian clashed, gold and black, light and shadow. Their power tore through the air, shaking the stones beneath their feet. Alara tried to reach them, but a wall of shadow rose before her, cutting her off. The voice of the moon echoed in her mind. You cannot fight him as queen. You must face him as the child of the moon. Tears blurred her vision. But how? Remember who you are. Her breath caught, and then she felt it. The pulse of power deep within her chest, ancient and alive. She closed her eyes, reaching inward. Light erupted from her palms, spreading outward in waves of silver flame. The shadows hissed and vanished. When she opened her eyes, Cairo had turned toward her. For the first time, there was fear in his expression. No, he whispered. It can't be. Alara stepped forward, her voice calm, filled with sorrow. You were never cursed, Cairo. You were lost. The moon didn't choose between us, she gave us both a gift. You just couldn't see it. He roared and charged, his blade raised high. But before it could strike, Alara caught his wrist, their powers colliding in a blinding flash of silver and red. Lucian shouted her name, and then everything went silent. Light consumed the courtyard. When the glow faded, Cairo lay motionless on the ground. The red moon began to pale, its color fading back to white. Alara knelt beside him. It's over, she whispered. Cairo's voice was weak but clear. You're stronger than I ever was. Forgive me, sister. She nodded, tears spilling freely. Always. And with a final breath, his form dissolved into mist, carried away by the wind. Lucian dropped to his knees beside her, gathering her into his arms. You did it, he murmured, his voice breaking. You saved us all. She leaned into him, exhausted but smiling faintly. No, Lucian, we did. The blood moon faded completely, and the stars returned, bright and endless. As the kingdom began to stir in the distance, Lucian lifted her chin, his thumb brushing away her tears. You faced gods and ghosts and still found the strength to love. There is nothing left in this world that could break you. Alara smiled softly, her eyes glowing like silver dawn. Then promise me, my Alpha King, that whatever storms come next, we'll face them together. Lucian's lips found hers, the kiss deep and fierce beneath the quiet sky. Always, he whispered against her lips. Until the moon herself fades. The world had changed when the blood moon set. For days, the kingdom seemed to breathe again, as if it too had survived the fever of war. The air carried the scent of rain and wildflowers. The rivers ran clear, washing away the last traces of blood and shadow. The wolves who had once fought under the banners of darkness now returned to their homes, uncertain but alive. And high above it all, the castle of the Alpha King stood silent, no longer a fortress of grief, but a sanctuary of light. Alara awoke to the sound of rain tapping softly against the balcony doors. For the first time in what felt like centuries, she had slept without nightmares. Her body still ached, her magic was still faint, but her heart was lighter. The bed beside her was empty, though the sheets were still warm. She sat up slowly, the white silk of her nightgown glowing faintly in the morning light. Beyond the open balcony, Lucian stood bare-chested in the rain. His hair, damp and golden, clung to his temples, and the water traced ever wide line of muscle across his back. He stood perfectly still, his head tilted to the sky, eyes closed, a man made of power and prayer. For a moment, Alara only watched him, her lips curving in a soft, private smile. There was something about seeing him like this, no armor, no crown, no duty. Just him, just the man beneath the Alpha. She rose and stepped barefoot onto the wet marble floor, the chill of the morning kissing her skin. When she reached him, she didn't say a word. She simply pressed herself against his back, her arms wrapping around him, her cheek resting between his shoulder blades. Lucian's breath caught. Then, slowly, he turned in her embrace. Alara, he whispered, his voice low and rough with emotion. You should be resting. I've rested enough, she murmured, tracing her fingers along the edge of his jaw. The war is over, Lucian. You can breathe now. He let out a quiet, almost broken laugh. I don't remember how. She smiled softly. Then let me remind you. They stood together under the rain, their foreheads touching, their breaths mingling. Around them, the world was reborn, the gardens greening again, the air filled with the scent of new life. For a while, they said nothing, letting silence speak where words could not. When the storm passed, they returned inside. Servants had left food and warm towels, but neither of them cared for either. Instead, Lucian guided her to the edge of the balcony again, where the sun was beginning to rise, soft gold bleeding into the mist. I buried Cairo's cloak beneath the old moon tree, he said quietly. It felt right. He wasn't only your brother, he was part of this realm, too. I didn't want his memory to vanish. Tears stung Alara's eyes. Thank you. He turned to her, brushing his thumb along her cheek. Do you regret saving him? She shook her head. No. He died free of the darkness. That's all I ever wanted. Lucian smiled faintly. You've always seen light where others see only shadow. She tilted her head, studying him. And you, my alpha, have always seen strength in the broken. That's why I love you. The words hung between them, raw and real. He leaned in slowly, his lips brushing her forehead. Say it again. She smiled, her voice barely above a whisper. I love you. This time, when he kissed her, it wasn't the fierce, desperate kind born of battle and fear. It was soft, steady, endless, the kind of kiss that promised forever. Days turned into weeks, and the wounds of war began to heal. The kingdom rebuilt itself brick by brick, heart by heart. Fields were replanted, children's laughter returned to the courtyards, and the great bell that once tolled for loss now rang in celebration. The people had seen their Alpha King and Luna fight not just for power, but for love, and that Ove had saved them all. Alara spent her days among the healers, her touch bringing life back to the sick and wounded. Her power, once feared, was now revered. The villagers called her the Silver Heart, saying her soul shone brighter than the moon itself. Lucian watched her from afar, often smiling to himself. He had fought wars, faced gods, and killed monsters, yet nothing had ever humbled him as much as watching the woman he loved rebuild what destruction had tried to erase. At night, when the stars blanketed the sky, they would walk together through the royal gardens. The flowers there had begun to bloom again, roses, moon lilies, and the rare wolfsbane plant, now harmless and beautiful under her touch. One evening, Lucian stopped in the middle of the path and looked at her. Do you remember the first time we met? Alara laughed softly. You mean when I threw a bowl at your head because one thought you were one of the guards tormenting me? He chuckled, shaking his head. You were wild, fierce. I'd never seen anyone so unafraid of me. I was terrified, she admitted. But I'd rather die fighting than kneeling. Lucian's eyes softened. You never have to kneel again. Alara reached up, brushing her fingers through his hair. Nor you, my king. You've carried the weight of the world long enough. It's time to live. He took her hands in his gaze burning with quiet intensity. Then let's live. Together. No crowns, no curses. Just us. The garden lights flickered around them, tiny flames dancing like stars caught in glass. The night felt sacred, not because of any spell or ritual, but because two souls who had survived hell were finally free to love. Lucian lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her wrist. You've given me peace, Alara. Something I never thought I'd deserve. She smiled softly. And you've given me belonging. A home. Something I never dreamed I'd have. Weeks later, the entire kingdom gathered under the starlit sky for the Festival of Rebirth, the first one in centuries. Bonfires burned across the valley, drums echoed in rhythm with the heartbeats of wolves and men alike. Alara wore a gown of silver and white, her hair braided with tiny moonflowers. Lucian stood beside her in ceremonial armor, his crown gleaming faintly under the starlight. As the firelight danced across their faces, the high priestess raised her hands. The moon has tested our strength, but love has prevailed. Tonight, we honor the bond that restored balance to our world, the union of our king and Luna. The crowd erupted in cheers, howls echoing across the hills. Alara's heart swelled with emotion as Lucian turned to her, his eyes shining with tears. He took her hand and, before the entire kingdom, knelt before her. Alara, he said softly, you once said you were born with nothing, no name, no place, no worth. But you are my everything. You are the heart of this kingdom, the fire in my blood, the calm in my storm. Will you stand with me, not as queen, but as my mate, for all the lives the moon grants us? Tears streamed down her cheeks. Always. He rose and kissed her, slow and sure, as the crowd roared in joy. The stars above shimmered brighter, and for the first time since the blood moon, the night sky was clear, as if the heavens themselves were blessing the promise they made beneath them. Later, when the fires burned low and the night grew quiet, Lucian and Alara slipped away to the cliffs overlooking the valley. The world stretched endlessly below, their kingdom, their home, their legacy. Alara rested her head on his shoulder, her voice a soft whisper. Do you think the moon will ever test us again? Lucian smiled faintly. Maybe, but this time, we'll be ready. She turned to him, her silver eyes reflecting the stars. Then promise me one thing, that no matter what comes next, we'll never stop choosing each other. He kissed her hand. I promise, my love. In every life, in every realm, I will always find you. The wind carried their words into the night, a vow whispered to the stars themselves. And as dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky gold and pink, the Alpha King and his Luna stood side by side, no longer bound by fate or prophecy, but by love. The kind of love that rebuilt worlds. The kind of love that even the moon would bow to. Dawn broke gently over the kingdom of Silvercrest, painting the land in hues of rose and gold. The forests shimmered with dew, rivers glistened like flowing mirrors, and the first rays of sunlight fell upon the castle's white towers, where once cries of battle had echoed, now laughter and song drifted through the halls. Peace had finally found them. The years of torment, of wolfsbane and blood, of exile and fury, had faded into memory, not forgotten, but transformed into the foundation of something stronger. The kingdom thrived again, and at its heart stood the two souls whose love had rewritten destiny itself. Lucian, the Alpha King of the Wolves, and Alara, the once Omega girl who had become the heartbeat of the realm. The moon, their eternal witness, had not risen yet, but its presence was felt in every corner of the world, in the gentle rustle of leaves, in the songs of the rivers, in the peace that lived in every breath. That morning, the castle was alive with celebration. It was the day of the bond, an ancient festival older than the pacts themselves, a day when mates renewed their vows beneath the open sky, promising to remain bound through all lives and all moons. For Lucian and Alara, it was more than ceremony. It was closure, and beginning, and eternity all at once. Alara stood before the mirror in her chambers, her reflection bathed in sunlight. Her gown was simple, woven from silver-threaded silk that moved like water when she breathed. Her long dark hair cascaded down her back, adorned with white moonflowers that glowed faintly against her skin. Her hand brushed the mark on her collarbone, the mark of the Alpha bond, no longer just a symbol of possession, but of unity. It pulsed softly beneath her touch, warm and alive. A knock sounded. Before she could answer, the door opened and Lucian entered. He paused at the threshold, caught mid-step by the sight of her. For a moment, he could only stand there, his golden eyes drinking her in. You, he whispered, his voice trembling slightly. You look like the first light after endless night. Alara smiled faintly, walking toward him. And you still forget to breathe when you look at me. He laughed quietly, the sound deep and full of warmth. His armor was replaced with ceremonial robes, black trimmed with gold, his crown resting lightly in his hands rather than upon his head. For once, he wasn't a king. He was just a man in love. He took her hands, holding them gently as if she were made of light. Are you ready? She nodded. I've waited my whole life for this day. Then let's not make the moon wait any longer. The ceremony was held in the heart of the moon garden, the sacred place where Alara had once nearly died saving a wolf cub, not knowing she had saved the Alpha King himself. Now, years later, that same place had become the cradle of their love, the symbol of fate's strange mercy. The path leading to the altar was lined with white petals. The people, wolves, humans, and every being in between, filled the courtyard, their faces glowing with joy. Children laughed, elders wept, and the air was alive with soft music and the scent of lavender and pine. Lucian waited at the altar, his heart pounding like the first drumbeat of war, only this time, it was not rage that filled him, but reverence. When Alara appeared, every voice fell silent. She walked slowly, her gown trailing behind her like moonlight spilled across the earth. Her eyes, silver and gentle, met his, and for a heartbeat, time itself seemed to hold still. When she reached him, he took her hand, kissing it softly before turning to face the high priestess. Before the moon, before the stars, before the souls of those who came before you, the priestess said, her voice ancient and steady, you stand as one. You have endured darkness, defied fate, and rewritten prophecy with the power of your bond. Now, as dawn meets dusk, do you swear, both of you, to remain one heart, one soul, one pack, for all eternity? Lucian's voice was quiet but firm. I swear. Why the blood in my veins, by the fire of my soul, and by the love that saved me. Alara smiled through her tears. I swear. By the light that guides me, by the moon that blessed me, and by the heart that chose me. The priestess nodded, lifting her hands. Then let the heavens bear witness, from this moment forward, your souls are eternal. As the last words echoed through the air, a soft glow enveloped them both. The bond mark on their necks flared to life, a fusion of gold and silver light that wound around them like threads of living flame. The crowd gasped as the two lights merged into one, neither gold nor silver, but pure white. The symbol of perfect unity. Lucian reached for Alara, and as he kissed her, the glow burst outward in a wave of warmth that rolled through the courtyard, through the city, through the mountains themselves. Flowers bloomed where it touched, rivers shimmered, and the sky seemed to sigh in relief. The kingdom had witnessed not just a coronation of rulers, but the birth of an era of peace. That night, the stars burned brighter than they ever had. The moon, full and luminous, hung low in the sky like a silent blessing. Alara and Lucian stood at the highest balcony, overlooking their land. The world below was sleeping, peaceful. The fires of celebration flickered in the distance, but here, there was only quiet, the kind of quiet that felt sacred. Alara leaned against the railing, her hair dancing in the wind. Do you ever wonder, she murmured, why the moon chose us? Out of all the souls, all the fates, why us? Lucian stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Because we were broken enough to understand what wholeness truly means. She smiled softly, closing her eyes. And now? Now, he whispered, we live. We love. We raise our kingdom. And when the next dawn comes, we face it together. She turned in his arms, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. You're certain the peace will last? He met her gaze with quiet conviction. As long as our bond does. And I intend to make sure it lasts beyond time itself. She laughed softly, leaning in until her lips brushed his. You always did like to make impossible promises. And you always made me keep them, he said, smiling. They kissed then, slow, tender, timeless. The kind of kiss that sealed not just vows, but lifetimes. The moon shone brighter for a moment, and a soft breeze whispered through the air, carrying with it the scent of night-blooming flowers and something else, something ancient and eternal. Perhaps it was the moon's laughter. Or perhaps it was the echo of two souls who had finally found their forever. Years later, bards would sing of the Alpha King and his Luna, how she was once a broken Omega, mocked and burned with wolfsbane, and how love turned her into the most powerful queen the realm had ever known. They would tell of the wars they ended, the peace they forged, and the children they raised, each born beneath a moon that glowed a little brighter than the one before. And on nights when the sky was clear, the people would swear they could see two shapes standing side by side in the stars, one gold, one silver, forever watching over the kingdom they had built together. The legend would say that their love never died. That even when centuries passed and new kings rose, the Alpha King and his Luna still danced among the constellations, their hands forever entwined. For true mates are bound not by time, nor by fate, but by the eternal bond of the soul. And so the story ends, not with death, nor with sorrow, but with two hearts beating as one beneath the endless stars.